The whole industry is moving towards more and more live service products, at least from a big budget perspective. Players are expecting endless content, regular content all the time, and EA and DICE have tried to shift the game into catering more toward that, but they really haven't been able to develop content at the rate that they used to. And the reasons for that are not always clear, but I've got some guesses as to why the content rollout for new maps and new features are a bit slower.
I don't think we need new maps and new features. I think what we need is just like the old maps, the things that everybody's worked on in the past. Bring them into the modern engines. They work just fine as is. Release them as is for the most part. But obviously the basic upgrades and stuff like that. But I think there's like this weird thing that gamers have been doing, which is like, hey, we need new stuff all the time, every day. And it's like, well, Counter-Strike players, I'll be honest, have been playing the same maps for 20, 30 years now. And that's just what makes a good game. It's like Minecraft players, even though I haven't seen playing the same maps, they play the same like the creative ones, at least. Like a super flat world is like, it's the standard game, it's the base game. I think there's a lot of base games here. Oh, my birds are going crazy. People just gotta, I don't know, they just gotta stop making new shit and make old shit new instead.
First of all, it seems like BF6 was kind of rushed to the finish line. They got it out. There weren't too many bugs at launch, but it certainly wasn't the cleanest launch of all time, and there were some lingering issues with the game that they were patching up as soon and as quickly as possible. But it definitely looked like a game where they're like, yeah, I think we can get it out in time, but it's going to be a little close. And therefore they kind of launched on their back leg a little bit with maybe not as much content ready to go for season 1. And so if we actually compare, say, player retention between Battlefield 2042 and Battlefield 6, Battlefield 6 has really good player retention right at the start, and then it starts to hit severe drop off slightly after that. And I think that's because season 1 and the lack of cool new additional content was really being trickled out, and it just wasn't enough for the player base. Now, the other problem, and one that for whatever reason DICE doesn't seem to get, or they just keep pushing forward with this weird philosophy on game development, is that they're designing the game with a shotgun, just blasting a myriad of features into the game universe and just saying there's something there for everyone. And it's like their ideas to
I don't even know if there's something there for everyone. Maybe, I guess kind of. At like the high up level of the game, it seems like there is kind of the something there for everyone thing. But it just feels like it's directionless, right? It's not like it's for everyone. They're just like the next interesting thing. And I don't know. This is kind of what happened with Blizzard and Overwatch. And so it's a little scary to see happen with other things, other games, where the vision of the game changes so much because the people who decide what happens in the game are so sporadic with their vision that like it never ends up being something that people can like reliably go back to as a game, and it just becomes a platform. Like the idea of games as a platform is kind of bled its way into the industry. It's kind of just like games used to be these one cohesive thing, and you kind of protected that in a way, and you improved it. Used to be, not necessarily. No, actually, I'm the games that survived were the ones that did that. Sorry, but back in the day, of course, there was lots that didn't. They were content farms, I guess, more than anything else. But yeah, we got to be careful not have games that are content farms, because nobody in the long term cares about content. I know that seems kind of weird. Maybe like cash initially, people like to pay for content, that's something, but as a long-term service, the content doesn't really mean anything. It's just about like the replayability, the reliability, right? The people want to trust that when they boot up the game that they're going to have fun, and they want to trust that the fun that they're having is somewhat consistent, right? The game that they had fun on a year ago should still be kind of the same game, or actually it should be a better version of the game that they played a year ago, but that's not always happening. Like the game is not even the same game anymore. It's like the UI changes where this is the thing he's saying with the player base, right? If there's not enough players to play the content that they release, or that wanted to play the content that you wanted to play in the first place, then the content might as well not even exist, right? Just might as well be thrown out. So
to try and capture as many people as possible, and to do that, just offering the most different ways to play the game is somehow going to be successful, as opposed to a focused game approach where they go, this is going to be the core mode or the core handful of modes, and we're going to make these modes so darn good that
he's literally just saying that right now.
Everybody wants to play them. Again, you could compare Battlefield to any myriad of games. I'll do Arc Raiders again because it's popular and a good comparison. They perfected basically a single game mode. They've added modifiers to it to make it more interesting so that each round isn't the same, but more or less it is one game mode per map, and it plays incredibly well, and they put a huge amount of time into refining that one experience. Now, I also want to float another idea out there. For a lot of game companies, if you have a live service game and a steady revenue source, that's great. They found a successful revenue model. But with Battlefield, if they're selling 20 million copies of Battlefield 6 within several months, I mean, you're looking at profits in the potential billion-dollar range for that company. And they go, well, made us a crap load of...
Wait, what did you just say? Hold on, I don't think that was true.
I mean, you're looking at profits in the source. That's great. They found a successful revenue model. But with Battlefield, if they're selling 20 million copies of
20 million copies of Battlefield
6 within several months, I mean,
20 million copies at even $80 a piece isn't billions.
And you're looking at profits in the potential billion-dollar range for that company. And you go, well, made us a crap load of money. How do we make that much money again? You're not going to get it from a live service game selling some skins over time. I mean, unless you have like the most successful skin shop of all time. Otherwise, you're only going to get it by making another game. So there's actually not a massive incentive to try and turn Battlefield into a live service franchise, because we've seen countless games make highly successful first titles and then they go, here's the sequel, and people go, I don't want the sequel. The first game was so good and I've invested so much time into it and developed my character so much and have so much progression that I just don't want to switch over to the next game and do it all over again. Instead, I'm just going to keep playing the first game. And so they kind of pigeonholed themselves into this live service model. So while I don't think that somebody's actively going, we need to make player retention worse for Battlefield 6 so that players will buy the next game. Like, I don't think there's an evil person at EA doing that, but I do think that the fundamental design of the game may be strongly influenced by the idea of, yeah, we're going to make a sequel and we want players to buy that sequel, so the content is going to inevitably drop off at a certain point and we're going to reduce the player population.
I don't think that's what's happening. I think it's just like the size of the game, the size of development has gotten so big, the people coming in to make the game don't play games and don't actually understand the game as deeply as somebody who spends all day playing the game, right? Games, the best games are the games that are made by developers that like spend thousands of hours on other games learning about what to do, but they have to be like the absolute peak design directors of these things, and they don't actually have choice over where that money necessarily goes. And the guys who do move the money, they don't necessarily play the games for long periods of time, right? Like, you want to have a game that the dude at the very, very top can't stop playing and loves it better than all other games, and that would be like the perfect game that, you know, that people like, obviously. You know, there's but that's not profitable, right? You don't, like, somebody who's at the top of a company doesn't necessarily play one game all the time that is the game that they're trying to build, right? Either they do play one game all the time and they have thousands of hours in like something else and they're relatively visionless and they're brought on to be like to make sure the product gets released, or they just don't play games that, like, it's really hard. Again, they probably lost hours in the Battlefield series, but you kind of lose the incentives to figure out, like, internally what makes the thing fun and enjoyable. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know what should happen. Not just, yeah, but this makes it's a big thing. It's like it happened with Overwatch in particular. It's gotten a little better now that the game director actually seems to enjoy the game, which is good. That's like 100%. Like that's what we want is, we want game directors that enjoy playing Overwatch. But for newer games, newer titles that re-release, the incentives are really bad. They're really hard to make something that's like people love through kind of a system of through a corporate system, basically. That's the only way of putting it.
The main game in preparation for the launch of the sequel. And even so, this theory doesn't necessarily support making Battlefield 6 less popular only months after launch. You would still want to maximize sales, so I don't think it's necessarily factored into the months right after the release of the game, but I will say it means that there's far less incentive to support a Battlefield game post-launch versus working on the next title. And while we only have one season of post-launch content to base Battlefield 6's support off of, we have many other games in the franchise that came before this that showed DICE really ramping down on their post-launch support compared to what we used to get. From my long-term perspective, I think Battlefield 6 is just carrying on the problems of past Battlefield games ever since we lost the premium support. Premium was the paid for all-in-one DLC package where you could buy premium and then you would get all of the post-launch content. It would be expensive, but it would pay for that content. However, you would only be playing with other players who bought that premium. So if there wasn't enough support for premium, you might get a whole bunch of brand new content with nobody playing in the servers, which definitely did happen in the past. And it just divided the player base and segmented up a game that's already losing popularity rapidly into smaller and smaller player groups. So it had its issues, and when DICE moved away from premium, the content rollout just never matched what we got in the past, and a lot of players were expecting more. And frankly, I think what they're expecting is reasonable for a game of this size, and as I mentioned before, DICE really hasn't made the changes to streamline their production better so they could generate maps quicker and cater to less game modes. If anything, they've made more game modes, and it's probably going to make their map production and designs even more expensive and slower. Now, the silver lining here, and something that could potentially make me eat my words, but I would gladly do it, is that if Season 2 just absolutely knocks it out of the park with a crap load of content, and at which point, if the player base population still continued to drop pretty drastically after that, well, we'd have to look at some of the other core issues of Battlefield. But it does feel, for the most part, at least on a surface area, that the biggest issue for BF6 right now is just an incredibly slow rollout of content, and players just
I don't know if it's content. I really don't know. I don't think it is content. The game just is so mediocre. Previous games that I want to spend hours playing certain maps because they were just fun. You just learn parts of different map and you play but the maps are so small in Battlefield 6, and there's so much movement, and like it's really well polished, but it's not like anything that's enjoyable. I don't know. It doesn't scratch that itch.